The casserole was still in the microwave. Cold now. I hadn't even bothered to take it out. The table was set. 2 plates, forks perfectly parallel, her favorite water glass with the lemon wedge floating like a useless afterthought. Everything was still, except my leg. My leg wouldn't stop bouncing. At 10:18 p.m., the screen lit up again. I lost track of time, grimacing face, "Be home soon." The first thing I noticed wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't. No mention of where she was. No apology. Just fake enthusiasm, stuffed into a sentence like glitter in an envelope. Useless and hard to clean up. So I typed the question that had been clawing through the back of my mind for weeks now. Is Mike that good? I didn't overthink it. Didn't draft it 4 times like I usually do. I just sent it. Then I stood up. I walked to the hallway closet. Pulled out her bags. The ones we took to Clearwater last spring. The trip she said felt off, but wouldn't explain why. I started folding clothes. Blouses, jeans, the robe she never wore unless she was sick. I didn't throw things. I didn't cry. I folded. Carefully. Almost like I was preparing someone else's things. For someone else's departure. By 10:28, the front door creaked open. She froze. The color in her face drained fast, like someone had pulled a plug in her. Her eyes darted to the bags. Then to me. She opened her mouth. I raised my hand. "Don't," I said too quietly. Because this wasn't just about a message. It wasn't just about Mike. It wasn't even about her coming home late again. It was about 1,000 moments she thought I didn't notice. Like the way she stopped laughing at my jokes. The way she never locked her phone until she started calling it private. The way she said good night from the hallway instead of next to me in bed. And the way she looked at her phone the same way she used to look at me. 10 minutes. That's all it took. 10 minutes to go from a guy with suspicions to a man with answers and a woman staring at her packed life. Realizing she wasn't the only one keeping secrets. And I hadn't even told her what I'd done with the rest of her things yet. She didn't step inside right away. She stayed in the doorway like she was afraid of waking something. Her hands were still on her purse straps, white-knuckled. I could tell she didn't know whether to speak or run. So she chose the third option, silence. For a second, I actually hoped she would lie. That she'd say it was a joke. That she had no idea what I meant by the text. That she'd say, "Mike, what are you talking about?" But she didn't. She looked at the bags. Then at me. Then, at the dinner table. "You made potatoes," she finally said. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that was what she led with. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Let me explain." Not even a simple Ezra. Just potatoes. Like she was arriving late to a dinner party she forgot she RSVP'd to. I didn't respond. I just picked up the lemon glass, the one I had sliced for her earlier that night, and carried it to the sink. She hated drinking water without lemon. I don't know why I remembered that at that moment. Maybe I was just looking for something to do with my hands that wasn't shaking. "Where are you going with this?" she finally asked, voice flatter than the water in her cup. I turned. "Did you even read what I texted?" She blinked, then looked away. "That was low." "No." "What's low?" I said. "Is you calling me from the school parking lot when your car isn't even parked there." That caught her. I saw it. The faintest twitch at the corner of her eye. She recovered fast, though. "You're tracking me now?" "I was tracking patterns, Laurel. I stopped trusting your phone weeks ago." Her face flushed. "So now what? You packed my things. What is this, a performance?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her phone across the room. But instead, I just nodded toward the couch. "Sit," I said. "Because I haven't even started." She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the same spot where she used to curl up beside me during winter movies. Now it felt like miles of ice separated us. I reached for the folder on the coffee table. Thin, unmarked. But when I opened it and spread the contents out, her breath caught so sharply I could hear it. Printouts, receipts, screenshots. One with her name, a timestamp, and a bar tab from a rooftop lounge she'd claimed she'd never been to. Another with a dinner reservation under Mike's name for 2, right around the time she'd told me she was grading papers at school. I watched her eyes flick over the paper trail like someone scanning their own obituary. She swallowed. "You went through my email?" "No," I said, sitting across from her. "Yours is locked." His wasn't. That broke her composure for the first time. Her lips parted like she was about to defend him, then clamped shut again. And I hadn't even told her the worst yet, what I found on the tablet, or what her friend Talia told me on the phone. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in months. I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. She was. And the clock behind her ticked louder than ever. Laurel didn't cry. That was the strangest part. She just sat there, eyes darting from receipt to screenshot to me, calculating the distance between each fact like she could still outpace the truth if she ran fast enough. But the thing about guilt? It slows people down. I leaned back in the chair and watched her carefully. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even disappointed. I was studying her like a man watching a storm out his window, knowing full well the roof's already gone. I guess it's all out now, she muttered. No, I said calmly. It's not. She squinted. What else is there? You've clearly been stalking every inch of my life. No, I've been waiting for you to admit it on your own. She blinked, visibly confused. She thought she was caught because I had proof. But that wasn't why I packed her bags. The real reason? Talia. She was Laurel's co-worker and best friend for almost 5 years. They carpooled, texted constantly, and shared inside jokes I was never meant to understand. I always liked Talia. She was blunt, rare in a world of curated politeness. Last Saturday, while Laurel was supposedly at a district leadership seminar, I got a call from Talia out of nowhere. No greeting, no small talk, just a tired sigh and 7 words that hollowed me out instantly. You deserve to know the real story. According to Talia, the seminar had been rescheduled 2 weeks prior. She only found out Laurel had gone with Mike when she saw the two of them, arms around each other, leaving a steakhouse downtown. Talia didn't confront them. She just watched. She said Laurel looked happier than she had in months, like she'd already made peace with betrayal. She talks about you like you're the problem, Talia had said quietly. But Ezra, I've known you both a long time, and I think she convinced herself you wouldn't do anything if she crossed the line, that you'd just take it. That line stayed with me. So when Laurel said, I lost track of time, I finally made my move. And now, sitting across from her, I could tell. She had no idea that Talia had already blown the whistle. You should have just asked me, she said, her voice finally cracking. You didn't have to humiliate me like this. I looked at her for a long moment. You mean, the way you humiliated me every time you pretended to be someone else? She flinched. You smiled at me with a mouth full of lies. Slept beside me with someone else's name still lingering on your skin. You used me, Laurel. I saw it in her face, the wall breaking, the structure crumbling. But then, something unexpected. Rage. She stood up suddenly. So what now? You kick me out? You win? You get to feel powerful because you played detective? I didn't answer right away. I stood slowly, walked to the hallway, and opened the front door. Her bags were already there. You're not being punished, I said. You're being returned to the version of yourself you chose. She stared at the bags. Then she said it. The line I'll never forget. But I thought you'd never leave. And that's when I realized she wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing the comfort of me, the fallback plan, the quiet placeholder. She wasn't crying because she lost love. She was panicking because she lost control. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. She didn't leave right away. Even after the bags were packed and the door was open, Laurel stood in the hallway like someone waiting for an encore that wasn't coming. Her shoulders were trembling, but her voice was still sharp when she finally asked, So this is it? I didn't answer. I just walked past her, past the front door, and out onto the porch. It was cold. The kind of cold that clings to your clothes and reminds you what still feels real. Behind me, I heard her shuffle. She moved like her limbs weighed twice what they should, not from guilt, but from the collapse of convenience. She had never prepared for this outcome. In her head, I was supposed to yell, slam a door, maybe even cry. What she never expected was silence. Control. The cab I called for her was already parked at the curb. I gave the driver a brief nod. She followed my gaze, saw the waiting car, and her entire expression cracked. She looked like she was about to beg, or curse, or both. But she said nothing, just lifted her suitcase, then paused. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she said, not facing me. I closed the door before she finished the sentence. Back inside, the house was too quiet. Every picture frame, every shoe by the door, every shadow on the wall reminded me that I hadn't just lost a partner. I'd lost years of who I thought she was. The betrayal wasn't just infidelity. It was impersonation. I didn't sleep that night. And then, the next morning, it happened. I heard the knock around 9:30 a.m. I was still in my robe, still clutching coffee I hadn't touched. I opened the door, expecting maybe a neighbor, or worse, Laurel again. But it wasn't. It was a courier, holding a slim white envelope with no return address and my name printed, not typed, on the front. Handwritten, in ink that smudged ever so slightly where someone had hesitated. I signed, closed the door, sat down. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single photo. At first, it didn't register. It was Mike, shirtless, lying on a cheap motel bed. And beside him, not Laurel, was a different woman. Curly hair, freckles, a tattoo of a clock on her ribcage. And Laurel? She wasn't in the picture, but someone had scribbled a note at the bottom in small, slanted writing. He's done this before. Just thought you should know. A friend. My heart stalled. This wasn't just about my wife cheating. This was about her being cheated on, too. I stared at the image for what felt like an hour. Not because I pitied her, but because, for the first time since the confrontation, I realized this entire triangle was built on lies stacked so high. None of us had any idea where the ground was anymore. I sat back, stunned. Then my phone buzzed. Blocked number. No name. No voicemail. Just a single message. You think you've won. But Mike's not done. And suddenly, everything that had felt settled came alive again. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't respond to the message. I read it, reread it, and locked my phone without replying. Mike's not done. The words echoed like a warning and a promise at the same time. But I wasn't interested in trading punches. I was interested in understanding why someone like Laurel had thrown everything away for someone like him. And more importantly, how long she had been living a life so far from mine without me seeing it. The next 2 days were strangely calm. Too calm. Like the air before a storm when the birds vanish and the sky feels like it's watching. I went through the motions, dishes, laundry, even folded the blanket we used to share on movie nights. But everything felt like evidence. Every quiet moment a clue. Something was off, and I could feel it in my bones. Then, on Sunday afternoon, I noticed the hallway closet door wasn't fully closed. I almost didn't check. It felt insignificant. But something tugged at me. I opened it, expecting a coat hanging crooked or one of my toolboxes left open. But instead, what I saw made my breath stop. A gray plastic storage bin, one I hadn't seen in years. Inside, neatly stacked, was a pile of old electronics, mostly dead chargers, tangled cords, and buried beneath them, Laurel's old laptop. I sat with it for a few minutes. Literally just sat there on the floor with the thing in my lap like it was radioactive. She'd told me it was broken, that she had it recycled, that she'd moved everything to the new one. I powered it on. The battery was nearly dead, but it held just enough life to boot up. No password. That surprised me. The desktop was nearly empty. Only 3 icons, recycle bin, documents, and one folder in the corner named Curriculum Draft _17. It didn't sound interesting or threatening, but when I opened it, I saw over a dozen subfolders. Inside those, hundreds of photos, PDF scans, Word docs, some going back years. But not of lesson plans. They were of him, Mike. Photos of them at bars, hotels, one of them laughing on a beach. And not just recent ones. Some had timestamps from nearly 2 years ago. That was when Laurel had first started taking weekend retreats with the teachers' union. I remembered those weekends vividly. I'd used them to paint the garage and fix our broken porch light. Meanwhile, she had been in hotel rooms drinking wine and photographing sunsets with him. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a folder labeled Private, all caps. I opened it. Emails. Screenshots. One thread in particular caught my attention. It was a back and forth between her and someone named Angela R. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it until I read the messages. Angela was Mike's ex-girlfriend. The one Laurel told me he'd dated briefly before starting at her school. The thread began polite. Angela warning Laurel. He lies when it's convenient. Be careful. But then the tone shifted. Laurel replied, I know what I'm doing. Ezra's weak. He won't leave. I have control. That was the line. Ezra's weak. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that screen, but eventually my legs went numb. I shut the laptop gently, set it on the floor, and leaned back against the closet wall. It wasn't just betrayal of the body. It was betrayal of my identity, of how she saw me. I had been background noise in my own marriage, and worse, useful background noise. A man to fill the silence until she didn't need silence anymore. And suddenly, That message from Mike didn't feel like a bluff. It felt like a warning. Because if Laurel had folders on him, and he had been warned before, then maybe the reason she got that photo of him cheating was because someone else had already tried to expose him. And failed. It was past 11 when I heard the knock. 3 quick raps. Not loud enough to wake the neighbors, but not timid either. Just precise. The house was dark except for the hallway light. I hadn't been sleeping. I hadn't really slept in days. I stood at the door, unsure for a moment if I should even open it. But something in me said this wasn't the kind of knock you ignore. I cracked it open and found a woman standing there in a long burgundy coat. Her hood was pulled halfway up, and she looked like she'd been standing in the cold for too long. "Are you Ezra?" she asked. No introduction. No smile. "Yes." She looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need 5 minutes." Normally I would have shut the door, but there was something in her tone, not panic, not nerves. Urgency. I stepped aside. She came in, eyes flicking across the hallway like she was mapping it. I led her to the kitchen, offered her tea, which she declined. She pulled off her gloves with slow precision and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. "I'm Angela." It hit me like a brick to the chest. Mike's ex. The one from the emails. The woman Laurel had smugly dismissed as bitter and obsessed. I hadn't expected her to look so normal. She wasn't wild-eyed or vengeful. She looked tired. Tired and sad. "I know Laurel and I were on opposite ends of something," she said. "But that doesn't mean I wanted this for you." I tried to warn her. She ignored me. "But you." She tapped the paper. "You still have a chance to come out of this clean. Safer." I opened the paper. It was another photo. Mike again. But this time, he wasn't shirtless or smirking. He was standing outside someone's apartment at night, talking to a man I didn't recognize, handing him what looked like a thick envelope. "I think he's paying someone," Angela said quietly. "He's been doing this with other women. It's a cycle. He charms. He pushes. Then when they won't leave their husbands fast enough, he escalates." I looked up, stunned. "Are you saying he's dangerous?" "I'm saying Laurel thinks she was the one in control," Angela whispered. "But Mike doesn't share control. He breaks people." I didn't respond. She stood up, sliding her gloves back on. "I know this is a lot. I'm not asking you to believe me. I just thought you should have the truth." As I walked her to the door, she turned once more. "Be careful who you try to expose. You might not be the only one watching him." After she left, I stood alone in the dark kitchen for what felt like hours. The photo still lay on the table. I flipped it over and saw a phone number scribbled on the back. Not Angela's. No name. Just, if things get worse. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I went into the garage, pulled down a box of my old external hard drives, and began backing up every file, every folder, every message Laurel ever left behind. Not for revenge. For protection. Because I had a sick feeling that whatever Laurel had dragged into our home, it wasn't finished with me yet. And part of me wasn't even sure she knew what she'd invited in. I thought I was done being surprised. After the photos, the messages, the hidden files, after Angela's warning and the late-night knock, I figured nothing Laurel or Mike did next could rattle me. I was wrong. The envelope came 2 days later, dropped off by a courier who refused to meet my eyes. No return address. Just my name printed in bold, all caps, like a summons from something colder than the law. Inside was a cease and desist letter. Real, professional, printed on letterhead with a name I didn't recognize. Garrett L. Kessler, attorney at law. The language was full of carefully chosen phrases, defamation, emotional distress, unauthorized access of private digital property. It accused me of stalking Laurel, of accessing her devices without consent, of sharing inappropriate and misleading content with third parties. It demanded that I cease all digital monitoring and destruction of character or face legal consequences. It wasn't just a threat. It was a message. Laurel had hired a lawyer. I sat with the letter in my hands, stunned not by the fact that she was fighting back, but by the specifics she included. Details I hadn't shared with anyone. Not even with Talia. Not even in the texts to Angela. Which meant she knew I had the files. She knew I had everything. And worse, she knew exactly what I was capable of doing with it. But here's the part that truly broke the illusion, the last paragraph. The part where her lawyer offered a path to resolution. If Mr. Ezra Larkin agrees to a private reconciliation, discontinues his engagement with outside parties, and removes all previously collected materials, Ms. Laurel Granger is open to negotiating continued access to shared assets and future privacy considerations. In simpler words, come quietly, and you can keep your house. I laughed out loud. She wanted to flip the narrative. She wanted to paint herself as the victim, the wronged wife being harassed by a paranoid, vengeful husband. She thought she could scare me into silence, into compliance. But something about the letter didn't sit right. It was the name, Garrett Kessler. It took me a few hours, but eventually I found it. Not through any formal database, just an old email Laurel had forwarded to me a year ago about refinancing the house. Kessler wasn't her lawyer. He was Mike's. That explained everything. Laurel didn't even hire a new attorney. She had gone directly through the man who, according to Angela, had handled Mike's last quiet breakup. And if he was involved now, that meant Mike was playing more than just the boyfriend. He was scripting the fallout. I wasn't dealing with a messy affair anymore. I was dealing with a pattern. That night, I didn't sleep. Around midnight, my doorbell rang. It was her. Laurel. No coat. No umbrella. Just soaked to the bone, mascara smeared, and her phone in her hand like she still couldn't believe I hadn't answered her texts. I didn't know they'd send you that, she started, voice trembling. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't let her in. I stood in the doorway, watching the rain hit the steps behind her, remembering every moment she said I was overreacting or insecure. She was shaking. Whether from the cold or the realization that her plan had failed, I wasn't sure. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. But you did, I said finally. And you were okay with it. Until you realized I wasn't going to stay broken. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I stopped her. You didn't send that letter. Mike did. And he used your name because you still don't understand who's really pulling your strings. The look on her face shifted, like a wire had snapped somewhere inside. For a second, just a second, I saw panic. Raw, real, unfiltered, and then something else. Regret. Not for what she'd done, but for the fact that it hadn't worked. You think you're safe, she said quietly, but you're not. He doesn't like being embarrassed. And you've embarrassed both of us now. I didn't slam the door. I closed it slowly, deliberately, and on the other side, I listened to her footsteps vanish into the storm. What she didn't know? I'd already made a call earlier that day, and the person on the other end, the one who picked up after one ring, had said only 4 words. We've been waiting, Ezra. I had no idea what I was stepping into when I answered that call. We've been waiting, Ezra, the voice had said. Calm, professional, genderless in a way that made you sit straighter. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a private investigator. It was someone who didn't introduce themselves at all, just told me where to go, what to bring, and what not to say. So I went. The building was tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a yoga studio in a part of town no one visited after 5 p.m. Gray door. No signage. Just a keypad. I knocked. It opened. Inside were 2 people, both middle-aged. One had a binder. The other had a tablet. And before I could even ask what this was, they placed a folder in front of me. Inside, a full dossier on Mike. Not just the photos. Not just the women. Not just the legal manipulation he'd orchestrated for over 6 years. No, this was bigger. Mike had been under informal surveillance for nearly a decade by a small legal integrity group, the kind that tracks patterns of coercion and strategic legal abuse. They couldn't act publicly because he hadn't crossed the big lines yet, but he was close. And Laurel? She was just the latest person who'd been baited into his cycle, used, convinced she was in control, then slowly isolated and left behind. But the kicker? Mike had made a mistake. He'd sent the same letter I received, word for word, to at least 2 other ex-partners' husbands. The legal group had obtained copies. They were building a case. They needed someone who wasn't afraid to speak up. And I was that person. So I said yes. It didn't happen fast. These things never do. But over the next few weeks, I handed over files, emails, folder structures, metadata. I gave them the backup drive I'd built from Laurel's old laptop. I testified in a confidential hearing for a woman I'd never met, someone Mike had nearly bankrupted in Arizona. And when it was over, they told me, "You helped more people than you know." It should have felt like revenge, but it didn't. It felt like peace. As for Laurel, she tried to message me again after the hearing. Told me she was sorry, that she'd finally seen who Mike really was. She said she wanted to meet just to talk. Said she missed the version of me who made her laugh during storms and made her lemon water without asking. But I never responded, because that version of me didn't disappear. He just stopped wasting his love on someone who couldn't hold it. Today, I wake up early, not because I'm haunted, but because I actually like watching the sunrise. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. Pickle, my cat, still claims half the bed. And last month, I met someone. Her name's Marin. She doesn't flinch when I talk about the past. She just listens, smiles. Once, she said, "You're quieter than most people I know, but you look like someone who carries a library around inside." No one's ever said anything like that to me before. I'm not rushing anything. I don't need to. Because this time, I'm not trying to prove I'm good enough for someone. I'm just choosing who's good enough for me. And as I sit here, coffee in hand, watching the sun crack open over the edge of the neighborhood rooftops, I realize something simple and true. Some endings do come with light. You just have to be willing to close the door in the dark first.